got everyone kind of piling in here, I want to turn it over to Mia. Mia, thank you so much for the warm welcome, the partnership here. Really excited. I'll let you welcome everyone in, and then we can kind of kick off from there.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I've got over 700 of our PCA national instructors and our PCA leadership signed up to either attend in person or to get a recorded copy of this. So I just wanted to welcome everybody. This is the first of our continuing professional educational program for PCA national instructors. And I'm so happy that Dion and Ken are here with us. I've worked with Dion several years with my Potomac region, he and his group have done our instructor refresher events that we hold every year. So firsthand, love them, great, really thoughtful ways to think differently about how we're instructing. And so I'm really excited to hear what you all say. So thank you to both Ken and Dion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mia.
Thank you so much for having us. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited about this. And so we kind of talked a little bit about early on the call. We're going to be using the QA function, and we don't want this to be a lecture tonight. We want this to be interactive. We want this to be fun. We want to joke around. And we wanted to hopefully learn some stuff along the way as well. So as we go, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A little chat feature. I'll try to monitor that as we go. We're going to have a dedicated Q&A section at the end as well. So to start off this evening, I just want to give everyone a really quick introduction to the two of us, who we are, why maybe we know what we're talking a little bit about in this sport, and then we can kind of dive in from there. Ken, do you want to go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself, just kind of a couple minutes here, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I thanks everyone for having us have this opportunity with everyone. Yeah, my name's Ken Hill, and I may not be like a common name in the car world, but in the motorcycle world, I certainly am. And my background is mainly in the motorcycle world. I'm still in the car world the last 10 years or so. And it's actually doing quite a bit more with cars now. But my background was, I got started in motorsports very late, wasn't until 30 years old. Immediately jumped right into racing and realized, boy, I didn't know a lot. And my technique to go faster was to go faster. And with motorcycles, the consequences are pretty high for that. So I didn't have time, right? I had a career, I had kids, a mortgage. So I had to really make my training count. And so I went to school. I ended up going to the Freddie Spencer School because I wanted to learn from a world champion. And that really started this pathway of wanting to figure out the sport and to decode it. Ended up being an instructor with Freddie Spencer. So I got to work with Freddie Spencer and Eddie Lawson and Nikki Hayden. So right there's, 7 world champions that I was able to get information from and work with. And that led me to doing nationals at a late age, did pretty well in nationals, and ultimately started my own coaching business. And I mean, this is not a hobby for me. This is how I make my living. It's how I pay my mortgage. I put my kids through college, was being a motorsports coach. And I'm dedicated to having people enjoy the sport as much as I do, to be able to jump in any car, any track, any conditions, anywhere, and get everything they can out of it, and to do it safely as well. And I think that's one thing that you'll see with Dion and I is we've produced methodology. We've got a process to go quickly, but also to do it safely. And I think that's one thing that is underappreciated in our sport is the consequences. And everything, for me, everything's just like you draw a corner backwards, we draw this backwards, right? We want to look at the consequences and figure out what we have to do to mitigate them. So there's the more than 30-second version.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. And for anyone that doesn't know me, my background is as a weather tech driver. I was fortunate to drive for Audi for quite a few years. Also drove for teams like Flying Lizard Motorsports, Alex Job Racing, DRG, in the Porsche world. Fortunate to win Daytona 24-hour, receiving 12-hour a few times. And then once I retired, I got really passionate about access affordability, convenience of world-class coaching, and how do, I was fortunate to have great coaches. How do others? So I'm a co-founder here at Blaze. And essentially what we do is one-on-one coaching for drivers of all levels. And I know some people are thinking here, well, you're coming at this from pro racing, your coaches on the platform are like Ricky Taylor, yourself, all of these guys. And isn't that too advanced, or isn't that too aggressive for the DE world, or for track day, or for, even amateur racing? And what I want to kind of say to that is everything we're going to talk about today is how do you do this in a safe manner? And how do we tailor it to the right people? And the focus today is to help you all get educated on how do you take your instructing skills and take it to the next level to coach more advanced drivers. And we're going to really kind of shed light on how we do this. What is our process? At the end of the day, we're actually going to pull up a real video of someone that I've worked with that is a higher level of driver actually in the PCA wheel-to-wheel racing. And we're going to break down sort of how we use our fundamentals, our methodology to identify how to coach them. So we've got a little presentation here today. It is not very long. We're not going to hopefully bore you guys to death here. We're going to run through this. And before we go any farther, one thing I want to do is just say thank you to everyone here. Instructors are the lifeblood of our sport. And I'm not just saying this because of who's on this call today. The instructors are our teachers, our salespeople, our marketing arm, our customer support people. You guys do everything, and you do it for the passion of the sport. You're volunteering your time to do that. We literally, and I honestly believe this, would not have a sport if it wasn't for each and every one of you. If it wasn't for you, track days wouldn't exist. If track days don't exist, amateur racing probably doesn't exist. And I'm a firm believer that sport doesn't have a grassroots and amateur level. The pro sports suffer massively. So I genuinely believe that. I just want to say, from all of us here, we're very appreciative. We really want to thank you for what you do. And let's have some fun tonight. Like I said, as we go, let's use the Q&A chat function so we can kind of dive into it. So,
yeah, and just real quick, Dion, just to echo that point is that we're not going to improve our sport. It's not critical mass, right? You're not selling, a gazillion iPhones. This is touching people individually, figuring out what their needs are individually and helping them improve. And by doing that, you touch one person at a time. That's how we're going to make a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So going into this topic, the big topic for tonight, and it's a big one. There's a lot to talk about here, is how do we effectively instruct advanced level drivers? The first place that it starts is with your own education, with your own driving. And so the single best way to improve your own instructor is to be a student yourself and to improve your own driving. And I've had sort of two ways that I've really experienced this myself. It can be hard for a lot of us to relate to what it was like being the ultimate beginner, to move up the ranks, to then try to go to intermediate, to advanced. And, I put myself in a position to be a student in multiple ways. One is I'm a terrible tennis player, but I love to play tennis. I seek coaching, and it helps me in my own sport, in my own coaching, be able to relate to what it was like to not know, 98% of what's out there, because it's never 100%, even at our level here. So putting yourself to be a student in any manner can really refresh when your mind, what's going on in their mind. And being a good instructor, being a good coach, you need empathy. It's a high empathy role. And at no point does the learning ever stop. In fact, I've got this story, and I've shared this with Ken before our call, and I haven't really talked to him much about this before. But when Ken sort of joined Blaze as our lead motorsports coach, we started talking, and he started using certain phrases in his coaching that I had never heard before, that I had never really formalized in my own head. So, for example, one of the key coaching points that Ken uses a lot in his coaching sessions, his one-on-one sessions through Blaze or in person, is talking about where in the corner the driver's minimum speed should come. So a lot of us think about braking points and turn-in points and apex points, exit points. No one really ever talks about, well, where in that corner should my minimum speed come? Because that's what everything's built off of. And when he started using those words, what I realized was, well, shit, in my own driving, I'm doing that. I'm thinking, when I know I'm a little over the limit, a little under the limit, I know that because my minimum speed came a little bit too early, a little bit too late. It's what I do naturally, but I never heard put words to it. And Ken, in that 1-2 minute section where he talked about that, transformed my ability to coach. I've become a better coach because I've learned from someone like Ken. And I've heard from so many of the customers that we work with and drivers that we work with where they're instructors themselves, they come learn with us. Even if it's with somebody else or anyone that's of high quality, you're going to hear how they communicate, the things that they focus on. You're naturally going to be able to start to incorporate that into your own driving. So I'm a firm believer of the best way to start is to educate yourself. And Ken, I think you're probably aligned with me there.
Yeah, it's funny because, even though like for last weekend, we had our Motor America National at Barber. And even though, yes, this is what I do for a living, I still have to have a point of reference. I need somebody to be able to run something by and to make sure that I'm doing the right things or looking in the right way or saying something. So even during those weekends when I'm doing certain parts of data, whether it's the rider data or whether it's the vehicle data, I have to have a point of reference. So I want to make sure that I'm not missing something or I'm not saying something incorrectly. And I think that's one thing that ultimately, great coaches is that they're always looking for feedback. They're always looking for a way to get better. They're always looking for a way to improve. And regardless of whether I'm working with a pro rider or a new rider, my goal is to learn something new every day, because that's something more I have in my toolbox that I can pull out when I need it. And I did. I learned something. Actually, I had this last weekend at the race. I learned a rider, a point, and a vehicle point. Right. So I learned something over the weekend that are in my notes now, and that I think is the hallmark of being able to improve.
That's awesome. So we're never going to stop learning. There's always ways to improve in your sport. And by the way, if you continue your own education, what ends up happening is you end up going faster. And this is sort of the instructor flywheel that we look at, where as you continue your education, your driving is going to improve. As your driving improves, your confidence, not only in your driving, but in your abilities, your ability to communicate it, your ability to go out there and do it improves. And by the way, the more that you build your confidence on and off the track and communication and doing it, what happens is your instructing naturally improves. And then finally, the more that you instruct, the more that you coach, the more you get educated. Every coaching session, I'm learning. I'm talking to customers. I'm learning, what do they feel in the car? How could I communicate it better? I'm reinforcing a lot of those fundamentals. So it's a great flywheel that starts with your own education, that improves your driving, which then improves your confidence, which improves your instructing, that loops back again. So it's a great visualization for us to always kind of remember here, and just sort of the fundamental level of what an instructor flywheel looks like.
Yeah. So just a real quick pause there. Confidence comes from knowing that you have a technique to mitigate whatever the circumstances are. And, when you're working with people, whether it's somebody new or even a pros are honestly in some ways the worst because of how fickle they can be at the very sharp end. And it's knowing that they have a technique or they have a process to get through whatever's going to be facing them. It's not something that they can't do. They just may not have it. And it's your job then to understand where are they at in the sport by evaluation, and then giving them techniques that can mitigate whatever they're lacking, whether it's fear, some sort of fear, or they're lacking confidence in an area. So it doesn't mean they can't do it. It just means they don't have the technique built yet.
Yeah, 100%. So building off of that, what goes into instructing advanced drivers? Ken, do you want to walk us through sort of the high level bullet points that we're going to be walking through tonight?
Yeah. So I think, what goes into instructing advanced drivers, and a lot of times, just when we look at somebody that might be new, is we're just going to start putting fundamentals out there for them because they don't know. But when we have advanced people, it's really important to understand these things that we have in front of you, which is we want to understand what their goals are. Is it that they want to, maybe they're going to want to be racing in 2 weeks in this track and they want some more time on this track and some of the things, or maybe it's, you know what, I really want to be an instructor. This is what I want to do when I retire. And so it's understanding their goals, so then you can establish a rapport of how you're communicating with them. Because you don't want to be, sending them down a pathway if that's not what their goals are aligned for. So establishing a long-term goal and a short-term goal, having an idea of what that is so you can tie your communication into that is absolutely key. Otherwise, you could be talking about something that they're not even interested in, or is not even in their goal set. So right out of the gate, when we're working with people's, I want to know their goals. And a lot of times I'll also ask them, what do they do for a living? Because that helps tie in with analogies, those different things. And
sorry, let me pause there for a sec.
Yeah, of course.
Just building on that empathy that we talked about early on, right? Taking the ability to understand the person, because if you don't understand the person, you won't be able to connect with them. And I think that's a really important part here.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. It could be somebody that is like, they're coming to you and they may be, you know what, I crashed last weekend and I just have got to figure out how to get this out of my head. Or I've got to, I'm stuck at a lap time, or I'm doing X, Y, Z. So understanding what their goals are and then establishing that rapport, I can't emphasize enough. I mean, it really shortcuts what you're trying to accomplish. So the other one that I think is very undervalued is the evaluation. It's very easy, and we find this a lot, that, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in one of the other slides too, but if people or instructors want to immediately jump to something that's not necessarily where your student is at. And it's like if you went to the doctor and he said, my arm hurts, he goes, okay, let's put it in a cast. And he's going to evaluate you and find out what's going on so he can give you the right treatment. It's the same thing. So doing an evaluation of what's going on is super, super important. So getting an evaluation done. And then with our fundamentals, I mean, the fundamentals, which we'll take you through tonight, that's just what you do. And it's a circle of the fundamentals. Is once fundamentals start to get built, fundamentals never go away. As one fundamental gets better, another one lags behind. And then you got to build that one, and then that one, and that one. And it just keeps growing. So everything is based on the fundamentals. And, we always joke that there's always somebody that can get in your car and drive faster than you. And they're just simply better at the fundamentals. That's all there is to it. And then one of the things to help people stay in the sport is giving them report cards of, how do I know I'm doing it right? And I think that is an important one. We tend to focus a lot on what we're doing wrong, but providing report cards of what we're doing right. And another big shortcut is giving them those report cards. And the last one that goes in this is having a post-session debrief, whether, having something that holds not only you accountable, but your student accountable for what that last session was about, so it can steer you to your next session. And again, these things just continue to get looped, but these all sound so simple, but it's actually, everybody wants to skip the simple and try to go to the little nuanced things, when in fact, these are the things that actually make all the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're about to go into all of these in more depth. Someone already asked, I thought, a great question. I think it's a great segue into our first discussion around goals, where they asked, is it really about goals or getting people to contemplate the strategy they'll employ to achieve their goals? A goal to trim off a second of lap time is meaningless without a strategy. Is that correct or not correct?
A lap time comes at the end of the lap. It doesn't come at the beginning of the lap. So it's you want that lap time. I want that lap time. I want to be faster than everybody, but I realize that it's the million things that I'm doing in real time that gets me that lap time. I'm aware of my lap time, but I have to understand all the things that gets me to that lap time.
Absolutely. So transitioning that conversation to goals, and we're going to show an example. And in fact, I would say an example we put up sort of a little bit of purpose here of our short-term goals is actually maybe not the right type of goal. It's an okay goal, but it needs that execution behind it. So we have two types of goals. We have short-term goals and long-term goals. And I always like to start off when I'm building a relationship with someone. I always ask them, hey, what do you want to achieve your next race weekend, track day weekend, whatever you're doing, time trials, what do you want to achieve the next time you're on a track? And if we came back, if you came 5 years from now and you hopped on a call or you texted me and you're like, man, I can't believe how freaking awesome this is. I've had so much fun. This has been incredible. What would need to happen for that conversation to come true? What would get you to that state? And that's what I like to sort of work backwards from the first weekend, 5 years from now. And you could sub in 3 years, 1 year, like that number matters a little bit less, depends on the individual. So Ken, can you walk us through, now that we have short-term goals, long-term goals, what are examples of each? And maybe what examples of good goals, bad goals, and maybe how you would communicate to someone that doesn't know how to set their own goals?
Yeah. So a couple different things that are to unpack is, when we do a briefing with somebody before their day is, we'll ask them what their goals are. And very rarely do we get somebody that doesn't say, I kind of don't know what my goal is, but it does happen. And a lot of times it'll be, hey, I just want to drive better. I just want to enjoy my car. I want to do these things. And as you start to get them to talk, and their goals will get unpacked at some point. Trust me, they always do. And that goes back to building the rapport. How did you get into the sport? Really, how did you pick that car? Do you like this track? You're struggling with turn 3. Let's talk about that. So there's plenty to unpack in these types of, initial briefings with you and your student. So if somebody doesn't have a goal, that's one thing. One part of this is it's always there, but it's your job to help unpack that. And just having simple conversations, you can typically get that pretty quickly. And then the short-term goals and the long-term goals is, in this case, this person wants to run a 39.5. That's awesome. And they also want to get into racing and finish top 5 in the championship. Great. So you can look at that and go, well, to finish top 5 in the championship means you've got to have consistent finishes, means that, you don't want to have any DNFs. You've got to finish consistently. So with someone like that, is you start looking at their 39.5 lap time, find out where they're at now, and then say, okay, look, let's say you're at a 43 now, you want to get to 39.5s. Great. Let's find out what's holding you back from doing a 41 or 42. Let's establish your 41 or 42. Let's have you run a bunch of 41, 42s, and then we'll get you to a 40. Then we'll get you to a 39.5. Instead of like, all right, let's just send it and get you down to a 39.5. So realize that there's so many different things that you could do with this client, but it's taking those two things and trying to combine your communication that allows basically a pathway or a bridge between those two.
And the one thing as well, just a small strategy here, the individual who's anonymous, I don't know who asked the great question about, goal setting versus strategy. One great small way to build a little rapport and to get into the psyche of who you're working with is to then also ask them, great, you went on a 39.5. Where is that goal coming from? Why a 39.5? Why not a 40? If they're doing a 43, why not a 41? Why not a 37? And you'll start to understand how they, like, a little bit of their process. Was it randomly thrown out there? And if it was randomly thrown out there, I might work with them on, okay, I'm not saying it's the wrong goal, but let's just have a strategy for how we come up with goals and make sure that it's achievable.
Yeah, there you go.
If there's someone that came, yeah, right. And then, but if someone came back and said, you know what, I know so-and-so in the same car in good conditions has run a 38.5. So I know that this car is capable of running that time in good conditions. I want to be able to say I've gotten my skills to within a second of them. And they've clearly kind of put some thought into this, some strategy into this. It just gives you an idea of who this person is, how they work, and it lets you check to make sure that you're setting proper goals and something that you can achieve. And Also, you could set sort of these smaller goals along the way. If they've set a really aggressive goal, then you have to break it down. If they set a relatively easy goal, then you can kind of see that and maybe coach them to say, okay, that's a great start place. How do we push that a little bit farther, right? So moving on to kind of the next big sort of topic here is, where do we even start? You've just been assigned a new driver. You know they're pretty advanced. What do you start with? Like, I don't even know where to go.
Once we've gotten past the sort of the meet and greet and the briefing and figuring out, what they want to do and what we're trying to achieve, great. I need to get something that steers me down that path. It's like if they're trying to run a 39.5, I'm like, okay, great, let's go work on this. When I don't know if that's actually what's holding them back, right? That's disingenuous. So the first thing that we're going to do is, if we have information available from them, whether they have a video or data that you can work with, we'll start with that. So it's like, hey, I'm going to send you a video of when I was here last. This is what I was struggling with. So you've got a game plan ahead of time of what you can mess with. So getting, again, the evaluation, getting something to figure out what is holding them back. We don't want to necessarily start with something if that's not what's holding them back. So video works great. Or if no video is available, use the first session on track to assess their fundamentals and assess what's holding them back. Don't assume again, it's going to the doctor and throwing your arm in a cast, right? It's you've got to go out there and you might give them a plan for the first session. You say, okay, let's go out there. Let's see where you're at. Let's work on getting the car in the right spot. Let's just work on precision. That's literally it, because you don't want to feed them too much information, but you want to be able to see where they're at and what's holding them back. And too often we'll find that a lot of people want to jump to techniques before we even know what's going on. So use that first session as evaluation, find out what's holding them back, so that steers the rest of your day.
Yeah, and just to sort of build on this, I think that the next sort of few slides we're going to go through here, where we talk about these fundamentals and sort of what they are here, that's going to be really where we start to really dig in here. Building on this, when you start to work with more advanced level drivers, I'm just going to go ahead and move to the next slide here, building from the ground up. When you start to work with more advanced drivers, what you're going to start to notice is instructing purely from the right seat, purely from seeing while you're on track, becomes harder and harder and harder to do in multiple ways. Number one, it's harder to be able to assess what drivers are what those mistakes are. When they're closer to the limit, when they're closer to doing things right, the gap becomes much smaller, and you're trying to take in a lot of information, being in the right seat, trying to think about break points and what's happening, what are they doing. It's easy to miss really small details. The second part of this is, as drivers get more advanced, the coaching gets more detailed, gets more advanced. And if you think about the dynamic of right seat instructing, I really think of, while you're on track, the verbal commands for the more advanced drivers. I'm not talking about day one, green group or early beginner drivers here. I'm talking about more advanced. Turns into more of a reminder system, not a coaching system. When someone is in the act of doing, you're not trying to give them a complex conversation where you're talking about the what, the why, the how behind it, which is what coaching really is for those drivers. You're reminding them of what you talked about off the racetrack, right? So the dynamic of how you start to work with these drivers, you start to emphasize things like video reviews, data reviews, off the track conversations, and then the right seat becomes more of a reminder system. And by the way, that scales. So as I start to work with, let's say I start to work with a quote unquote advanced level driver, a lot of times when they start to work with those plays, I'll say, I don't need your data. All I need is your video. I could do 98% of what I need to do off your simple GoPro video. But as that already advanced driver starts to progress farther and farther and farther, there's going to then turn to a certain point where I say, you know what? Now I need your data. It's the last few tenths of a second. Now I need these small nuances. So it's sort of, real beginner, right seat coaching is great. Then you evolve to where it is no longer the best environment for coaching. You turn to video, and then eventually you turn more to data. But with data, you always need the video to go along with it to give it context. So just something to think about as you're communicating, as you're thinking about things. Right seat coaching should be as few words as possible. Reminders, it shouldn't make the driver think while they're out there. I never want to make someone think while they're driving. So on that note, it's really easy I'm working with an advanced level driver. I've got to get to the complex stuff, right? I've got to go straight to the fancy things of driving, where even the best, even when I am slower than my teammate at the Sebring 12 hours, what am I focused on? I'm focused on the fundamentals.
Yeah.
I'm looking how are they braking into this corner versus how am I braking? How are they able to roll at that more entry speed? It's not some crazy advanced technique. It's they're adjusting the weight transfer of the car a little bit better. They've thought about the corner a little bit better. They have better logic of the corner. They have better car position. They have the fundamentals better. And Ken, can you expand on sort of one of your last notes here is don't jump to the last 1% when the first 60% is the issue.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of this. This happened 3 weeks ago. I'm up here in Washington, up at the Ridge, where there's this little like track day time attack thing that I did. And it was a bunch of guys and I had my little car out there. And I get a guy coming up to me and he's running 2 or 3 seconds off where some of the other guys are, but his car is very capable. And he's asking about tire pressures and he's asking, questions that I mean, I get it. Hey, what are your tire pressures and, what are you doing on disalignment and all those things? And it ended up he ended up finishing, I don't know, mid-pack in this deal. So later on, he comes up to me and says, hey, can you right seat with me for a couple laps and let's, just go for a ride? Yeah, of course. So I go for a ride with him and he's again, essentially worried about tire pressures. He's worried about slip angles and he's 4 feet off of every apex. It's just, I mean, but and that's the thing, right? It's the joke is they're worried about, what compression clicker or they're worried about what camber and they're braking 250 feet too early. So it's realizing that instead of looking at the last 1%, we have to make sure the first 60% is dialed in. And as we'll talk about that and realize that we want techniques that allow you to go quicker and of course be safer when you're doing it. And if we don't have the fundamentals built, the 1% is the last 1% is essentially worthless at that point.
And I will say, just to build on this, that's where confidence and ability matter a lot. I've seen this a lot firsthand, and I think everyone here is going to experience this at some point. When you have that driver that's talking about slip angles, but they're 4 feet off of every apex, they don't want to hear, well, we're not ready for that type of stuff yet. Like, let's go back. Let's work on the fundamentals. They don't want to hear that. So you have to have the confidence in what you're saying. You have to have the confidence in your own abilities on the racetrack as well. I'm not saying that you have to be a world-class driver, but you have to be proficient to be able to show them what a decent approach looks like, but the confidence to be able to tell them why we're not ready for that type of stuff yet. We need to come back to this, and here's why. That's part of the communication here, because people are going to challenge you. And if you don't have confidence in what you're saying, they're going to see that right away, and they're going to eat you up. And I've been eaten up before. So it's just part of that confidence that we want to come back to and really hit on here, right? Awesome.
I think when we get into this is when we look at it, we'll go to the fundamentals, John, and we'll chat about that.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So you want to walk us through the fundamentals of our sport?
You have a good question in here. What about making a simple suggestion that can save time to build their confidence in you?
That's a great one. Hey, Elaine, it's good to see you, man. I think that makes a lot of sense. If you're working with somebody, and you see something small that could really give them a help, I think that's part of instructing. That's part of coaching. And it helps build rapport. So I think there's some nuance here. What is the thing, stuff like that. But if you can help someone go faster really quick, it does build a level of trust or some confidence in what you're saying. Now you gotta be able to back it up, but I'm personally a fan. I don't know about you, what your thoughts are, Ken.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, I mean, we're always trying to make sure that we realize people, I mean, honestly, if I can do it, they can do it. I might have more reps than they do. That you realize that's literally it, right? I might have more reps, but that's really it. So I think people that have the right mindset, they go with the right processes. Yeah, I think anybody can do it if they stick with the fundamentals and stick with the process. And also to this other question about, I thought we're talking about advanced drivers, someone who's 4 feet off the apex doesn't sound advanced to me. You would be surprised. You'd be really surprised.
A lot of speed in amateur racing is confidence in car control. So if someone just has the confidence to throw the car around, they're going to go relatively fast for those groups. And a lot of clubs, I'm not saying PCA, I'm just saying, across the ecosystem, look at, okay, this person is driving relatively quickly. Let's just move them up. So there are drivers that are thinking or would call themselves advanced because they have some confidence but miss every apex. It's very common, unfortunately. But anyway, let's go into these fundamentals, Ken.
Yeah, just a quick little sidebar here, where the fundamentals came from. So why do we have these and where did they come from? And I mean, this is really basically what we built from my last 25 years of doing this professionally. And a lot of this came from—
Can I pause you for a second here too? Sorry to interrupt. So I've been in the sport for 20 years. If you had asked me 2 years ago, hey, Dion, what are the fundamentals of racing? I've been like, I don't know, where you put the car, maybe? I would have no clue how to answer that question. And I'd ask all of you, have you thought about what fundamentals of this sport are? I certainly haven't. I don't know if anyone else has really thought about this. So I just want to pause and just say, the next 15 minutes here are probably one of the most important parts, to give yourself a feedback loop, to give your drivers a feedback loop. So Ken, I apologize for interrupting.
No, you're good.
I just really wanted to emphasize this.
Yeah. So you look at all other sports, right? If you Google volleyball fundamentals, you'll get pages of it. For young football, players, they have punt, pass, and kick competitions. But yet in motorsports, we're supposed to just jump in something that's really fast and go around a track with, thinking that it's cool and you're risk averse and you like adrenaline. And it's actually completely opposite. And again, for my aspect and how I came up in this was, I didn't have natural talent. I didn't start doing this till I was almost 30 years old. I didn't have any of these things to fall back onto. So, but now, as in my younger days, I was a competitive cyclist, did a lot of things with cycling, and realized that, wait a minute, if this is a sport, it's trainable. If this is a sport, it's trainable. The problem is we don't think of it as a sport. So by thinking of it as a sport and we identify what the fundamentals are, then it's absolutely trainable. And I think anybody can do it. So where these fundamentals came from was essentially, yes, the last 20 years of what I'm doing is I would literally write things down through the schools. I was Freddie Spencer School, the Miller Ford School, Yamaha School, and literally write down what organically were the most important things. What just sort of naturally happened and what was our central point of reference for how we were teaching. And it all came down to the first one. We always were centered around vehicle placement, meaning it was all about where we were on track to get the most acceleration or the most deceleration. That was always a central point of reference, as well as apexes. So everything that we did with our vision and focus and motor controls and brakes and eyes and all these things were to get our vehicle at the right place at the right time, so you could be accelerating for the longest period of time. So that made things so much easier because you had a central point to be talking from. And it just made things so much easier of, okay, what is vehicle placement? We can define it if everybody wants, but having the car in the right place at the right time on entry and exit, so you can be accelerating for the longest period of time. And that was always the number one thing that we talked about. So everything's centered around that one. So I'll pause there for a second, Dion, if we want to go more on that one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're getting some good feedback on this one overall. So someone asked through the chat, and I just want to kind of clarify and call this out. Why is body position 6? Like, if your body position's all jacked up, none of the other ones matter. I think the thing to call out here is, think about these as there are 6 fundamentals, and they're looped. And at some point, as you improve one, the other 5 are going to lag. And then you improve each one of the other 5. So at some point, we're not saying that body position is the least important here. We're saying there are 6 fundamentals. And depending on every driver and where that driver is, they may need to focus on more on one of these. But which one of those it is, maybe they have great vision and focus. Their motor controls are great. Their brake adjustability is great. Their turning rate is beautiful. Their body position is great, but they're 4 feet off of every apex. Okay, now we're focusing on that vehicle placement. But once we get that vehicle placement where we want it, okay, now one of the other ones are starting to lag. Then we want to start to work on some of the lagging ones. So think about this as, as a driver, you're always elevating one of these. And as you elevate one, the others start to lag. You need to elevate those. And you're always building all 6 of these. That's how I look at it. Is that how you look at it, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be something. Yes, you're going to have body position. You put somebody in the car, you want to make sure they're sitting appropriately. Where body position on the car side really comes into play, and we see this quite a bit, is the faster somebody goes, the tighter they'll hold onto their wheel. Even their inputs won't necessarily be where they need to be. And we start working on how they tighten their core, how they're supported, how they start moving their arms, how they can wiggle their fingers at certain times. So yes, initially, it's like saying vehicle placement. They're on the track. Yeah. So that, just because they're on track doesn't necessarily mean that vehicle placement is correct. So, and then, I like what John put in here, which is right. The right place at the right time at the right speed. And yes, that's correct. And essentially vehicle placement, the definition is placing your car in the best possible position on entry and exit to maximize acceleration for that given corner. That's what vehicle placement is.
Could you give us the definition of the rest of them as well?
Yeah. So we'll go through those. And then, I mean, we can talk about the other comment here about braking later. There's a lot to it, especially at the Grand Prix level. But yeah, I mean, if Max is doing that, don't think that Lewis isn't trying to do that. There may be other factors that mitigate that. But yes, that's what they're all trying to do. So
I would just simply say, no, fundamentals are at a whole are not variable. The fundamentals that I would follow are the same fundamentals that anyone else would follow, the same fundamentals that Max Verstappen follows. He just does it at a much higher level than I would do it at or anybody else would do it at.
Yeah, Charles, and we're going to get there in just a second. Weight transfer comes under motor controls. It's when it's how you're going to transfer the weight and when are you going to transfer the weight, and that's all done through motor control. So vehicle placement, we talked about that. Vision and focus are tied together. So it's not eyes, right? Vision as a total. Your eyes are the tools that take in the information. And think of it this way, if your vision's not engaged, your technique is not engaged. We need something to tie our timing of what control we're using at what time. So our vision, meaning how we're using our eyes, how we're looking at reference points, how long we're looking at reference points, what the reference points are, that's what ties the information in for you to react with the right technique at the right time. So vision and focus, to get vehicle placement, we have to understand where we're going. Our vision and focus is what allows us to be able to use the correct references to get us into that correct vehicle placement. And again, I can't emphasize the focus part a lot. If your focus isn't engaged, it's because your eyes are not engaged. You don't have something to tie your technique to.
Yeah. So just to build on that, there was actually this great study I read recently from, I think it was Stanford. It might have been doctors at MIT as well. And they did a study tracking sort of our ability to sustain focus. And to sort of take this to the extreme, what they realize is individuals that are blind or have significant visual loss also have a significantly reduced ability to sustain focus. And that sort of is the extreme of this. So anytime that you're losing focus on the track, that maybe you feel like a little lost on the track in a certain corner, like you just can't get it consistent, it's immediately back to your vision. Where are those 5 reference points? Where are your eyes? Do you know your reference points? It's huge.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. If you're lost on the track, it's just it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you don't have a place to put your eyes. You don't have a place to put your technique.
And
so motor controls.
I'm going to just say, as part of our continuing professional education program, we're going to do a whole seminar module on vision and focus, because there's 45 minutes worth of talking on just that one topic.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I could talk on this for hours. And it's funny because I do a lot of work on this. This is sort of like the vision part is sort of like my pet. And I just did a great thing. I got to wear eye tracking glasses for the first time a couple months ago. So I got to work with but I mean, we're working the whole idea of this. And one nice thing about my group is we've got some pretty cool people. One of my points of reference is a former Top Gun instructor. And so we get a little bit of access to some of these things. So,
by the way, we're going to be building into the Blaze app, sort of a training section that'll give you, if you're working with a coach every week, you'll have certain drills to work on. And in those drills will be vision and focus drills. If you're at sim racing drills, reaction time drills, hand-eye coordination drills, stuff that you can start to train each and every week. And that'll all be related back to your coaching session. So when you get a coaching session, the coach will kind of clarify what points can we work on. You'll get things to work on each and every week. So we got some really cool stuff coming out here. But let's just keep kind of rolling here, because I think, again, we can talk about vision forever.
Yeah. I mean, there was a good comment about soft focus, and that's just has to do with periphery. And again, I could spend 30 minutes talking on that one. So motor controls. Yeah. Motor controls are really all the physical inputs that you're putting in. It's your initial brakes. It's your end of braking. It's your steering input. It's your throttle. So motor controls and how you're using them is this is where we get what we call brake timing. It's where we call throttle timing, even how you're moving the wheel. All these different things work into motor controls. So motor controls are the third fundamental. And then brake adjustability. This is, I mean, the two like silver bullets of our sport are your brakes and your eyes. Those are like the big ones. How you use your brakes and how you use your eyes. Those are like the silver bullets. And brake adjustability, and in Dion, you can certainly talk about this as well. But I would say, besides vision, the number one thing that I end up working with students, and this is over 25 years, is how they're using the brakes on corner entry. I mean, there's no question. So this being able to use the brakes in being able to use the brakes for what the upcoming situation requires, that's brake adjustability. And again, you have to have the right motor controls for that. You got to have the right vision and focus for that. And you got to know what your goal is and what the vehicle placement is. So that's why brake adjustability is for. Then we have turn-in rate. And turn-in rate and turn-in point. And turn-in rate and turn-in point are so important, because we look at it as generally where you turn in is where you're going to exit. So the point in which you're turning in, the rate at which you're turning in becomes so important, because as you go faster, you're traveling the same distance in less time. So your processes have to start earlier. So turn-in point, turn-in rate are very, very adjustable, and understanding what that adjustment looks like is so important. And then we get into, again, this is why we have the fundamentals, but there's an order to these fundamentals, because where you're turning in and how much brake pressure you have at turn in, and your ability to use the motor controls, your ability to see where you want to end your braking to get the right vehicle placement. So that's why there's an order to all of these. And then the last fundamental we have is body position, and that's how you're basically using your hands, how you're supporting yourself, all these different things. Again, we could talk about body position for an hour, but
core engage for that turn-in points.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many different things. I dealt with this about 3 weeks ago with another client, right seating, where why were we going slower the last 2 laps of his sessions? Because he was wearing himself out with too much pressure on his hands, core wasn't engaged, and it was absolutely affecting his lap time. So anyway, these are the fundamentals. This is what we're supposed to be working on And more importantly, this is the order in what we're supposed to be working on these things. And to Dion's point is, yes, they're looped. As one gets better, one lags. And it might be, you might have somebody that has the best brake adjustability in the world, but maybe their turn-in rate's not right, or maybe they're too abrupt with initial throttle. So as you go through these, it's figuring out what's holding the person back and being able to refer to the fundamentals and put them together and put their plan into play.
Absolutely. So we've got one more slide here that we're going to actually break down a video. I know we're running a little bit longer than we anticipate. Hopefully everyone's having a good time with this so far and taking and learning.
There's so much. I know I think the video will be a lot of fun. There's so much.
It's always more than we think it would be. So let's go to the final part here, which is post session. So we just talked a lot about how, the during sessions, more reminders of what you talk about off the racetrack. Ken, how do you approach post session and post event?
So I spend a lot of time. Yeah, I spend a lot of time with this, and this is part of our debriefs. And I've been in Grand Prix, and how we download there is no different than, of course, how dealing with even on a very amateur level. Separate the emotion from the technical when giving feedback. So to start with is we're not saying don't be emotional. We actually want to capture the initial emotion. It's whether it's, oh my God, this car's crap, or it won't turn. Well, great that we want the initial thing, because that helps steer us to the technical side. Now, so emotion, that initial emotion is there because there's something extraordinary going on, and that's going to help steer you to the technical side. So emotion's great, but don't let emotion be the technique. So once you've captured the emotion, that gives you the area to look for on the technical. So learn to take the emotion. That's great. But once you've gotten it, then it's time to move into the technical side with feedback. So, and there's a whole nother thing, again, when it gets into coaching, how we approach students and how we talk to them and whether we know they're actually ready for feedback or not. Another one we could talk for an hour on. So separate what the car is doing from what the driver is doing. And when we're doing downloads at a professional level, we actually have a download sheet that goes through each aspect technically of what the car is doing, what's happening at initial brakes, what's happening deep into the stroke, what's happening at brake release. When you go to the throttle, is the car still turning? Does it run wide, right? So we've got a multi-questionnaire thing that tells us what's going on with that. But then we also have a driver download. And the driver download, you'd be surprised when we go through the driver downloads, the car runs wide on exits. And we find out, okay, well, how are your motor controls? Yeah, they're actually not that great, right? They're stabbing the throttle. So we reconcile those two things, or their vision's not correct, or they don't have a reference point. So it makes your job much easier if you can separate what the car is doing from what the driver is doing. And so on an advanced driver level, most of the time the car is not really into play unless they're overdriving it. So having a driver download that goes through the fundamentals and scoring them and talking about it, man, does that make your job easier. It's like, hey, yeah, you know what? I know we were working on brake release that last time. And you did a great job getting on brake release, but let's kind of go through the rest of the fundamentals. How was your focus that time? Oh, you were thinking about this. Okay, your focus wasn't that great. Or, wow, your car placement was fantastic that last session. What got you to focus there? So we have driver downloads and we use these. It's funny. I have to write these things down with working with somebody. So if the student's not writing them down, they're doing themselves a little bit of a disservice because I have to write these things down every single run. So yeah.
By the way, just the great thing to build on this is one of the important things to call out here is, Ken, let's say the last time you went to VIR was in early April. You're going back there in August. And you want to, your measurement here is lap times, right? I want to go faster. are we, even if I'm driving better, am I likely to go faster at VIR in August, heat of the summer, slick track versus, in early April when it's cool out? Like, probably not, right?
Not happening. Not happening. Yeah.
So does that necessarily mean that I'm driving worse in August? Could I drive better, but go a little bit slower? Is that possible?
Yeah. So there's so many different report cards that go onto there. I mean, we have our real-time report cards. How am I doing on my apexes? I drove at the Ridge last night. So I drove last night at the Ridge. I did 3 20-minute sessions. I missed one apex, one. And that to me is a failure. So, I mean, that's a report card of how I'm doing it. So did I hit all my apexes? How was my brake release? How much neutral throttle did I have? What were my lap times? What were the consistency of my lap times? Your lap time might be a second off, but maybe you were able to string together 10 laps within 0.2, whatever that might be. So there's so many different report cards that are available to you if you want to make them available to you to tell you how you're doing. So when grip is really good, you got hero grip, then your lap time's going to plummet.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. It gives you more things to measure, which is one of the hardest parts of our sport is most people only measure lap time. Well, if it's raining out there, how do I know if I'm doing a good job, right? So could you answer, I'm going to get our video ready here. Could you answer Jason's question for me here, Ken?
Yeah, absolutely.
While I get that all set up?
Absolutely. So are you directly assessing all the fundamentals? I am, yes. So I'm looking at every fundamental when somebody's driving. I'm trying to figure out which one is holding them back. Now, to your one question on body position, a lot of times when we get into body position, it's if they're starting to be reactive instead of proactive and our input starting to get to be abrupt. At the end of the session, is the initial brake abrupt? Is the steering wheel input abrupt, or is the steering wheel input late? Are they getting behind? So a lot of times if somebody gets tired, they may not be supported well, or they're just simply putting too much weight on their hands, and then everything gets really, really slow. So that's how I'm looking at that.
It takes some experience to start to see some of these small things.
Yeah. So then Ted's question, too much actual physical eye focus impedes the ability to look through the corner and see what's coming next. Kind of. So this is where we have eye timing. And there's, again, we could talk on eyes. I could talk on, poor me, I could talk on eyes forever. But the eyes, and we've
just having flashbacks over there to Potomac when we were in person.
I know. But again, the eyes is such a massive part of our sport. I can tell you story after story on this. But yeah, the eyes is you actually do need to have deliberate and intricate focus to get what you want from your reference point, because if you don't look at it long enough, you can't react to it appropriately. That said, to the other question about, I think it was soft focus, was your periphery is important, but it's not as important as deliberate focus, because if you have deliberate focus, then what happens in your periphery stands out more. So there's a whole thing to it. But
the next one.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, I know. I'm sorry. I feel sorry for you guys. You get me rolling, we're screwed.
So what we've got here is an onboard video. And this is actually from someone that I work with. It's in a Cayman GT4 car. In fact, this was Hastings this last weekend, a good driver. He set track records before. He and I have been working together for quite a few years through our Blaze platform. So you can see how this works. I want to play the video. I know that Zoom can be a little bit funky with playing the video, so I hope it's not super choppy. It might come across choppy. And what we're going to do is play a lap. It's 1 minute and 10 seconds or so. And then Ken and I are going to talk about how do we distill this down to giving actionable feedback that's not too much, that just focuses in on a few different areas. So I'm going to go ahead and play the video.
Deanne, we can just start, stop at the relevant points and we can talk those relevant points.
Perfect.
So it doesn't jump.
Perfect. So I would just start right away here. With this higher level driver, we're immediately seeing a brake adjustability issue, right? And we're not going to call it everything we see. There's a little bit of something in every corner, but we're going to call out how I would coach this driver. So we're looking here at their brake application, right? And what we're seeing here is, what does this brake adjustability look like? They've got a pretty good initial ramp up to peak brake pressure with their hands straight, great. But then what happens next is not what we want to see, where they're in straight line braking, and you can kind of see here as they turn in, they start to release before the turn in, but then right at the turning point, what do? They add brake pressure to it. They get up to peak brake pressure right as they're turning into the corner. So their brake zone here, if we're going to draw this on data, peak brake pressure, little release, big ramp up, and a pretty fast release. This is one of our fundamentals is if our brake adjustability and our motor controls aren't right, the weight transfer of the car is incorrect. And now they're not going to be able to be optimized to roll through turn one at speed. When they start to turn in, they start to say, oh no, this is feeling too fast. I'm going to add brake pressure. That's going to upset the car. It's going to overload the front tires. It might create oversteer. So this is immediately the first thing I start to say is, hey, one of the golden rules in our sport, and by the way, there's always exceptions to the rules, but this is not one of those, is the motor controls here should be, once we start that brake release, we never want to add brake pressure back to it. Now, this isn't the perfect brake pressure for every, or brake graph for every corner. There's different ones. Sometimes it might look like this. Sometimes you might have it more square. But for here, I want it to look more like this. So that's the first thing I see right away. Do you agree with that so far, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be all these microscopic adjustments, but not a fundamental change to the brake graph like that. Not for this type of radius. If it's a different radius, that might be there, but not for this radius.
Yeah. So now what we're going to see here is turn two at Hastings, and we're not going to be as in depth with every corner here, is one of the most important corners. Why? Let's play it for 15 seconds. So we're going through turn two here. It's still turn two, right? What does it lead on to? It leads on to a long time spent at full throttle, right? So as an instructor, as a coach, one of the first corners that I'm going to focus in on are the corners that lead on to the longest straightaways. Am I right, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, so a corner like this that leads onto a long straightaway, one, I'd be looking at seeing where he's starting positive acceleration, meaning when is he starting his drive, and then when is he getting to full throttle? And I would be relating that to the slow point in the apex to make sure that he's maximizing everything that exit has.
So we got the slow point here, initial positive acceleration here. And let's just see, back to full throttle, but then off of full throttle, back to full throttle. That's finally correct. Here.
Yeah.
Right. So how would you discuss this with this driver? I know you've seen the rest of this lap, everyone else hasn't. Often, would you be focusing in on here at turn two? Or would you say, hey, not important enough, let's go focus somewhere else? And if you would, how would you break this down with the fundamentals in mind?
I mean, the car placement's not bad right there, right? We can deal with that car placement, but what we would do, and Dion, if you want to draw it, is I would have a throttle graph that's slower initially from say, 15 to 40, and then have it, keep not pausing it. It should go all the way up to full throttle without pausing. And instead, if he goes to too much throttle, has to come off, then goes back up, and then he finally gets to full throttle late, where all that area, I can't even tell you what a big deal that speed under the curve is. It's massive, especially on lower horsepower things. So we want to be in a position to where when we start our drive, we don't want to have to hesitate our throttle. And again, this is the video with the data makes it super easy to see.
Yeah. So this is, again, relating back, could we be talking about a little bit of this is the ability to relay information in bite-sized, actionable ways. If you ask me to break everything that this driver is doing wrong here, I could talk about their brake pressure is too high here. They hold on to the brakes too long. They should be a little bit wider in here. They should maybe delay throttle just a little bit later. They should be slower to throttle. Maybe they could have unwound the steering wheel and gotten farther out earlier. There's 6 things that this driver could have done better in turn two. We're not communicating 6 things. Yeah,
Elaine, to your point, would you say the eyes were wrong? Potentially. I would say maybe not in this case because they did go to throttle and then backed off. I think it was an input issue, not an eye issue. But you're 100% right that eyes can play a massive part of this.
Yeah, I would. Again, this is where you have to have a communication with the drivers that you're working with. And I would ask them hey, do you know, like, and I know this driver, we've talked about the slow point of the corner here, and I've got that reference point built in. So as you develop a relationship, I know that this driver knows the 5 reference points in every corner. Every corner has 5 reference points. The minimum speed is one of those reference points. I have him knowing to glance to that. So I know in this instance that it's maybe not. Now, you can tell there's some red flags, like if the driver doesn't open their hands early enough and doesn't get all the way out wide early enough, that's an eye issue. If they're turning in too early, too late, that's an eye issue. So there's some little things that you can see to build confidence in that. But a lot of times with eye issue, it's also having a discussion with that driver and understanding what they think about here. So kind of driving through here, I think we can kind of move forward a few of these corners here. You can see how long the straightaway is. Ultimately driving pretty well through here, maybe a little bit early on the turn-in point. But, through there, that's the type of corner I would ignore because I don't want to give notes for every corner. Am I right so far, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I didn't think there was anything too bad right there. That one he held a little bit too much wheel too long on that one. So he just kind of got out there and he kept holding wheel all the way out to the exit apex. So a little bit of a later turn in or just a little bit slower at the slow point, something to help him get the wheel unwound a bit.
Yeah, so you can look for, I know this kind of was one of those questions earlier on in fundamentals, we can look for end results and then ask ourselves, why is that happening? This is an example of something that's, at this level where the nuance is really small, it would be hard to identify the exact reason that they aren't able to unwind the steering wheel if I'm sitting in the right seat for them. But if I've got video and data, I can pause the video. I can look at this and say, okay, they're not early to throttle. You know what? Yeah, it looks like we're apexing a little bit too early here. We're probably turning in too early. So that's the type of stuff that's hard to do in real time that you need the video for at this level.
Yeah.
Here we're pretty solid.
Yeah. So Ted's got a couple of comments. Yeah. I mean, the turn-in wasn't as precise as it could be for sure. And yet to your point, yeah, the line just wasn't as crisp as it could have been. And then William's comment, isn't that basically slower in and faster out? Again, I could talk on that subject for 2 hours, but it's not. It's controlling your entry. It's controlling your entry. We're never saying slow in, fast out. We're never saying point and shoot. We're saying make sure you understand the exit's the most important thing, and then bring your entry in to match your exit, but don't screw up your exit. So I want you in as fast as possible, and I want you out as fast as possible. But the best way to start that is to be faster out and then bring your entry up to that. Otherwise, your hair will be on fire. You're going to be, pushing the car and you're going to not know what a good exit is. So we always start with the exit first.
What I can do if people are interested is, so one of the things that we do with a lot of our members, my members every other Tuesday night can host a call, Colin hosts a call that I'm always on, and then we have coaching. Ken, you've had a few calls with members where you've really broken down that exact thing, which are what are our reference point? What's my priority in the corner? How do I safely build, using priorities and reference points, how do I safely build up to the limit so I'm maximizing entry, I'm maximizing exits? I could send some links to some of those calls so that people could kind of take a look at that and learn a little bit more if they want. They're on our site.
One thing, the Blaze program is pretty cool in this respect where twice a month I do one call. Colin Mullen does another call. Colin, pretty accomplished young driver. And we hold very deep topics. So twice a month, we're going, not only going, 10 feet wide, we're going 10 feet deep on all these things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a great example of one area where I could immediately tell that the driver's eyes, vision, and focus were wrong. And how did we know this? Watch what happens here. The car in front of us turns, and what does our driver do, right? The second that car turns, our driver turns, right? That's a great way to know our eyes were not looking in the right place. We weren't using our reference points. We just were staring at the back of the car in front of us, which then got us in way early, which because of that, and then also on corner exit, we're not using nearly enough road, right? We don't want to use all the road here, but we want to use more. Those are the subtleties that you can look at to immediately say eyes are low. Yeah. But I think the next corner and the final corner are the last 2 points that I would focus on this driver. So Ken, looking at the brake zone here, right, in this corner, I'd love to get your sort of thoughts, right? So he comes in, we brake, throttle application starts here, and then we're partial, back to full throttle. I think we're talking about matching up brake zones, that brake adjustability, the motor controls of how we're braking doesn't match the corner that we're entering. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, go to see where he lets off the brake.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think his timing was off there a little bit. I mean, especially this is kind of a weird little combination corner thing here. Yeah, I mean, I looked at it and he kind of, he went to the brakes. He did build some pressure, but it wasn't a brake graph that matched what that corner was. So it was just, again, the brake timing was just off on that one a little bit.
Yeah. And this is talking about brake graphs for types of corners. Again, we have a bunch of calls on those. We could talk more about that. But ultimately here, too much brake pressure too early in the brake zone, overslows by the turn-in point, and now we're on throttle too early. So this type of corner, I wanted to see half the amount of brake pressure. One of the things I'm realizing is, as you progress as a driver, the definition of light brake pressure starts to change. And like my definition of what light brake pressure is often half or a third of what someone else might actually think their light brake pressure is. Building the dexterity of the foot feel to be able to feel what light brake pressure actually is. And then let's just go to the final corner that we can wrap up here for tonight. The final corner here is one of the biggest areas that I would focus in on. So it leads onto the long front straightaway. So again, corner leads onto the longest straightaway. You want to focus a little bit more in here. Let's just take a look. Now it's hard to see in video. Now we completely miss our apex point here.
Yeah, and look what happens on the exit.
Oh no! Yeah, exactly. We kind of lose our focus a little bit here, and now he's probably thinking about that for a few corners, right? So there's a few things that could lead to this, right? This could be braking too late, too much entry speed. This could be the incorrect turn-in point. This could be not able to release off the brakes early enough. There's a lot of things that this could be, and this is one of the hard parts is being able to identify. Here at Hastings, there's camber way in here. And by going wide, we now go off camber. And what you'll see here is when we go wide, we go even wider than the car in front of us, we lose the camber. We can never get the car rotated, and then we just understeer wide. So this is more than anything else. I'm not saying that there's not problems in the other areas. Yes, we can execute better on those fundamentals. Remember, they're looped. Remember, we're going to focus on the first, like the bottom one first. This is a car position issue. We need to be a little bit closer inside to use the camber to help rotate the car to get the drive out. We fix that first. And then we start to see, okay, where else in this corner can we improve? Where's our brake adjustability? Where are our motor controls? What's our turn-in point? The turn-in point kind of relates back to that. But you'll see here how, talking about this driver, what we would focus on is there's little bits in every corner. We would talk about a little bit in turn one, turn two. We would talk about sort of the eyes back in here. We would then talk about this brake zone and this turning point. 5 things, relate them back to the fundamentals. We explain the what, the why, and how behind it. And we have an action plan. We give them a report card to start to grade themselves. And know what the beauty of this whole process by using like video or data is they can instinctually start to learn, what are we looking for? And they're going to be able to start to identify that themselves. And one of the coolest things about this is subtly, it's the whole saying, if you teach a man to fish, right? Here, by doing this, they're going to be able to start to grade themselves, start to learn themselves. They're always going to need that coach. Even I need a coach at this level, but I can pick up that feedback loop faster. I can start to see how I'm doing better. I can start to build a plan in my head of what matters the most that I could take no matter where I go, no matter what car I'm driving or what vehicle I'm driving.
I think the hallmark of what we're trying to accomplish is we're not here to do catchphrase coaching. We're not here to tell you what to do. We want to identify what needs to be done, but we want to be able to tell you how to do it with actionable report cards, with things that you can figure out in real time, what the report cards are, as well as post-session, what some of those report cards are. So I think we can get into a quick, I know we're way over, but couple questions. But one of the ones, if you're coaching a good driver, would you wait for a second lap to see if his concentration? Yeah, it depends. Sometimes we get drivers or we get videos that are only 1 lap. But yeah, I like to look at multiple laps. If I have multiple laps available, I'm looking at multiple laps, right? I want to see a consensus
100%.
of what they're doing. So
yeah, 100%. And by the way, like there are, even if it's just 1 lap, if you get experienced enough, like I now know, I can know immediately what was just an honest mistake, broke a little bit too late, no harm, no foul, versus what's a consistent mistake almost right away. that takes a lot of experience. So for sure, early on, watch the practice session, watch the whole session, look at the data from the whole session. But for the most part, as you gain experience, you can start to pick up on things and start to read. There's a little bit of an arc to it, if that makes sense.
How are we doing, Mia?
I think we're doing really well. I do want to,
Awesome.
as an instructor in PCA, one thing that you touched on was that you are continually learning as a coach, Dion, and you are continually learning. I think it's really important for instructors to test out their skills at this higher level. So if your region doesn't have the finances to rent a track for an instructor development day where you're retraining or advanced training your instructors, then maybe use some time when you've got a track rented and put two instructors in a car with each other and play on each other, and to see how someone else may coach a line differently than you and what verbiage they're using. Especially with advanced drivers, all of our instructors should be advanced drivers. So to train and continue the development of these skills, and try to do it when your regions have a DE already, if you don't have the ability to do a separate instructor training day. It's really important. You never stop learning.
No, and Mia, I love your
100%.
thought. I mean, I co-own a track day company up here in Washington. And for our instructors, right, I mean, track time is so precious, right? It's so precious and so expensive. We really look at our days as data collection days. So it's like, even though we may not be able to work with someone that day, get a video, get data, have someone do whatever it is. And then after we can evaluate that after the session where we have more time. So the next time that they go, they've got something to work on. So yeah, you have to, if you apply it, yes.
And the logbook.
Yeah.
So you might get a student assigned to you a few days before an event. You should try to touch base with the student that you're going to be coaching. But you should also, if your region has logbooks or electronic logbooks, really take some time and read through what prior instructors have said about the person and what the skills that they need to develop, and kind of maybe use that as a basis point before you get into the car, and then use those first two laps to identify on your own as well what other things that person should be working on. We might not always have the opportunity to have a driver, provide a lap or two via video.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a nice to have. It's great when it's possible. We know it's not always realistic. And I know we're actually working on a project here with the PCA Potomac region in that direction to make a lot of that a lot easier. So we're really excited about some stuff in the works there. But however you can learn, the other big part of this is having a common language. And I think that, I know, Mia, is something that you're really passionate about, that you're working towards as well. But it's amazing to me how many people have different opinions on what different words may mean. And just starting at that square one, having a common language that we all communicate is so important, because it's so easy to talk past each other and not realize it in this sport.
Hey, Mia, I've actually built a glossary. Can I send that to you?
Yes, please.
I spent a lot of time on a glossary. I would love to send it to you.
Yeah. And the other great thing is PCA's never done a continuing professional education year per se. And so just amazed at how many of our instructors are really thirsty for this kind of information. So I just wanted to thank everybody who's on the call or going to be watching the call later for taking your time to develop, continuing to develop your skill set. And there's more of this to come, because it was a hole in what PCA had been offering before. And I'm really thrilled that we've got so much positive participation and feedback already. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
I mean, I've never seen 800 people sign up to come and watch a webinar on this, which is nuts, which is really, really cool. And we appreciate it a lot too.
I do stuff all over the country, and a lot on the motorcycle side and also on the car side. And by far, this group is the most kick-ass there is.
It's only getting better.
Absolutely.
Too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think we can kind of end it there for tonight. And we had some great questions. I do want everyone to know we're always available. You can feel free to reach out to us with questions, if we could be helpful to the community, if you scan that link in the bottom left-hand corner and you just use the contact us form or chat form on our website, I manage all of our support personally, so you'll get me. I might be a little bit slower to respond if a lot of people message me at once, but you know how to reach me. My email address, really simply here, and I can just type it out, is dion@blaze.io. Trying to make it nice and easy here. So don't hesitate to reach out to me personally if you have questions, if we could be helpful to you. If you don't know what we do at Blaze, it's really all about drivers like you and helping you have a place to go to continue your education in addition to what PCA already kind of has. So the way that we work is you get linked with a dedicated coach, whether it's me, it's Ken, Ricky Taylor, whoever it might be. There's a $29 trial for all PCA instructors and drivers right now. Try for 30 days. You get an intro call with your coach. You get a full coaching session. You get access to all of our calls and libraries, so you can go there and just drink up all of that information to continue to learn. You get chat messaging with your coach. It's a full comprehensive program. We used to be about one-off coaching sessions. We didn't think that worked right. We really wanted to be a comprehensive long-term relationship that you build with your coach to help you on all forms. So highly recommend checking it out if you want. I think we'll have another few more, like 2 or 3 more of these throughout the year. Am I right, Nia?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So I think the next one, maybe we talk about vision, but if people have recommendations, feel free to drop those in as well, and we can work together. And we're just really excited and really thankful for not only you guys joining us tonight, but also, again, for everything that you do for our sport. I want to reiterate that this probably not hyperbole to say that this sport wouldn't exist if it wasn't for each and every one of you here, for instructors. So we really do appreciate it, and it means a lot to us for everything that you do.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody. And just so everybody knows, this is like 1% of the information we have.
Yeah.
There's so much. And again, we're going to be working, Blaze and myself are working on a pretty extensive masterclass program that goes over these types of things. It'll be pretty involved. But yeah, and then, to Greg's point, of course, we're available. Get a hold of us so we get stuff booked. And yeah, we'd love to be part of your guys' next steps.
I guess it was successful because my husband just texted me, loved it, !
There we go. That's a win. Yes. Love it. Awesome.
If
Thank
you
you,
all
everyone.
need me, right, HPDE chair@pca.org is how you can reach me, and you've got how you can get Dion and Ken here. So, all right. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye.